Coming to you from an undisclosed location in the Appalachian Mountains, I'm Manfred Brusco. This episode is called Flat Earth. I was presented yet another person as falling or believing that the Earth is flat. In addition to several people I know, and at least one family member that believes the Earth is flat. I have a couple things to say about that, and then I won't say it again because you can actually prove the Earth is round on your own without going up in an airplane, without going out into space. You can prove it to yourself. I had the opportunity to be in the Navy, and I had the opportunity to be out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean with no lights on a surface submarine in the middle of nowhere. And there's a few observations I made. One, that the Milky Way galaxy is enormous, and that the space is so enormously beautiful. I was taken aback by it, even though I wasn't a Christian. I was awed by it, and I felt that there had to be a creator back in the recesses of my mind, and actually I found out later there was when I met his son. I have recently come across people that have been trying to persuade others that the flat Earth is real and that we are being lied to by a satanic CIA cult that the Earth is actually flat, but they want us to believe it's round for their nefarious purposes. Now, there are some things that there might be a satanic cult running things and killing babies and doing all sorts of nefarious things, but what I can tell you is what I know. I've had the opportunity of being in the Navy, being out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, in the middle of, and the Pacific Ocean, but riding on the surface in the Atlantic Ocean in the middle of the night. And we were actually stationary for a while. We were just out there hiding, or I don't know what we were doing, but we were allowed to go up in the sail and take a look at the stars, which were enormous. There's an enormous amount of stars with no light pollution. And the universe looks completely round. It looks like you're inside a sphere. There's no way to describe it to you how amazing it is. The other thing about being in the Navy that I noticed that as ships in the night come by and they don't know you're there, we don't ride on the surface very often, but we did a few times. The ship will not disappear like you would at a vanishing point. Like when something gets too far away, it completely disappears, and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and it disappears. Well, when you can see a long way, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller, but as it gets to a certain point, you see the hull disappear, and then you see the mast disappear. That's indication that it's going over something. It's going over a horizon. The only way to explain that is three-dimensional spheroid geometry, basically. And that's one thing. You can say, well, that's good. And we also used navigational computers. We used a grid system, very much called the Mercator, Universal Mercator mapping system or whatever. And then it was also the, the latitude and longitude, basic little bit smaller detail. And according to that, every degree was about 69 miles. So at 69 miles, it would be 1 degree curvature in the Earth. Or you would turn a degree over the planet. This is a very large planet. You do the math with the geometry, you can figure 25,000 miles around the equator, and that's been done. Someone's traveled around the Earth, if you believe Magellan. Well, he did, and his crew did. And a lot of people believe that in Antarctica there's just a big wall that holds in all the water. Okay, there's a couple of things we need to clear up here. First, the ships don't just go vanishing point. They disappear. Sorry, Let me strike that. Ships just don't go vanishing point. They go beyond the horizon, and there's a certain way that disappears. Sometimes you'll see a car or something, and it will disappear. You're like, well, that's proof that the Earth is flat, man. Because if it were over a horizon, it would disappear like I just said earlier. The problem is the Earth is not flat. It's got different elevations, different mountain places, and different elevations, so you really can't get a good picture until you're on the ocean. And for those who haven't been on the ocean, you can even try it on Lake Huron or Lake Michigan or Lake Superior, one of the big lakes that you can go further than 69 miles. And some people say, well, there's people in Cleveland that can see southern Ontario on a good day. Yeah, you can. There's a different light refraction property that certain light you can see the shore of southern Ontario from Cleveland. But like I said, 1 degree is 69 miles. So think about that. In most places, as you get closer to the poles, the distance gets a little shorter. Not much, but a little. So, second point, out at night in the middle of West Virginia, in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains, 2 in the morning, 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, you can look up and see the North Star. Now, I've been told that there's a Southern Cross, a set of stars that they use to guide themselves navigational-wise in the Southern Hemisphere. I've never seen them, but I've seen pictures. In the Northern Hemisphere, there's a star called Polaris, which is the North Star. 1,000 years ago, it was Canis, which used to be the North Star, but it since has moved a little bit, so we can no longer call that the North Star. So Polaris is the North Star. The Big Dipper, or Ursa Major, rotates around this star and other stars. And if you look at the ecliptic, that's the line or the plane that all the planets are on. If you think of the sun be in the middle of a record player and the record going out, most of the planets are on that plane that album, that the vinyl would be on. Not to mention the fact that Saturn looks like it's a record player. The only way to describe, and zodiacs are on the ecliptic as well. So those will be in different positions over the courses of thousands of years. The interesting thing is you can predict where Jupiter, Mars, Venus, Saturn, where they're all going to be at exactly the time they're going to, you can calculate it using Euclidean geometry, and you can figure out where they're going to be, basically, and using Newtonian physics. It's not hard. It's a little complicated, but it's not hard. I mean, you can figure it out if you just know a little bit about geometry. So the only way I can describe what I see when I look up at the North Star, and I see on the wide range that Orion's going around a big circle, and the Big Dipper's going around in a little circle, and I think to myself, there is only one way I can see that, and that is with the fact that we're on a ball, and the universe is round, and there's an axis that the Earth spins around on. It's slightly egg-shaped, not much, but it's a really big planet. 69 miles for 1 degree is a very large number of people. When you look up and everything's spinning around the North Star, the only way to explain it is the fact that we're going around in circles. We, not them. Because stuff will appear at different points at certain times, and the only way to explain it is our motion around the sun and our motion around the planet spinning on its axis. The other thing, I've seen telescope. I've looked through a telescope at Saturn, Jupiter, Venus, Mars, the moon. The moon has color on it, by the way. It's not just black and white. But I mean, you can see it for yourself with the binoculars. You can see the moon is round with your naked eye if you really look, and with binoculars you can see it more. You can see the way eclipses and the lunar eclipses work and the solar eclipses work. The only way to explain that is three-dimensional geometry. That is the only way to explain it. So all these things that people are telling you, it's a bunch of crap. It's like, it sounds nice, but it's just, it doesn't make any. Nonsense is still nonsense, even if it sounds like it's not nonsense. I guess I could say that. Okay, my other point. Now, just yourself, looking at the stars, looking at where the North Star is, knowing a little bit about being a Boy Scout and navigating at night. You have to know where the stars are to be able to navigate to find your way. Um, if you don't go out at night. But if you don't let the magnitude of your ignorance pull you into a useless path. I mean, we all have ignorance in some areas. We all have ignorance. Like, for instance, I don't know how oil or gas are made. I don't know how people use resonance imaging to find oil and gas. That is an area where I'm completely ignorant. So if someone started making up theories about it, I'd be like, okay, I don't know. I don't know how you do it. I've seen resonance imaging of ground, and I know how vibration works. So there are things I'm not ignorant about. I'm definitely not ignorant of nuclear power. Um, and I don't want you guys to be ignorant of the earth. You're missing so many amazing things when you think that there's a small group of people trying to tell you that the earth is round and that it's a big conspiracy and that it's all part of a satanic cult, CIA run Nazi laboratory thing trying to mess with your minds. You can see the stuff for yourself. I mean, unless you think you're in the Matrix, but that's a whole other story. You can observe this stuff. Okay, so here's the next thing. Someone says, well, if the earth is moving over at almost 700 miles an hour in a circle in most places, why don't we fall off? Why doesn't the air fall off? Why doesn't the water fall off? Why, it's like, they say the earth is 70% water, but I don't believe it. Have you been to the Pacific Ocean? Have you been to the Atlantic Ocean? Have you been through Gatun Lake, in the middle of the Panama Canal? Have you been to the North Atlantic? Have you been off the coast of Portugal? Have you been off the coast of North Africa? Have you been to Bermuda? Have you been in the Caribbean? There are so many brilliant, beautiful things that you don't hear about that exist. Anyway, moving on. I'll use this as an example. Suppose you have a friend that has a Peterbilt truck and he ties on a 53-inch or 53-foot trailer and he has a basketball court set up in there. Now he's going to drive through Kansas, and to pass the time away, you and your friends are going to play basketball. So he gets up to 75 miles an hour, and you guys first feel the G's of him accelerating. But once the hills go away, you start your game and you don't even notice that you're in a truck anymore. Now, when you throw the basketball at the hoop, the basketball doesn't go back to the back door because the vehicle is traveling and you're not. Your inertia is one with the vehicle. Friction has held you in place, or the door has held you in place as it got up to speed, or you braced yourself. And then once you got up to speed, you became the same inertia as the truck and trailer, as with the basketball. So when you throw the basketball at the net, it depending on how good a shot you are, it goes in. It doesn't get pulled back because the truck is moving 80 miles an hour, because you're moving 80 miles an hour with it. So at the beginning of this planet, when the Earth started spinning, and it probably spun before we got here, we were put in place, I don't know, but I wasn't there. Inertia keeps everything moving at the same speed. What drives the planet to spin around, I have no idea. What gravity is, I have no idea, but gravity is the weakest of forces, and gravity in a large quantity of mass will attract more mass, and that mass will form in a bubble. There is a magnetic field around our planet, and when we get coronal mass emissions, the magnetic field acts spheroid from the readings that we get on the ground and the readings we get in the sky, and the strength of the magnetic field in the sky. We're like one dynamo or generator that generates electricity through the ionosphere, discharges it through lightning, but that geometry matches a sphere. Electrically speaking, the electric magnetic field of the Earth is a sphere. There's no other way to put it. So electrically, physically, mathematically, geometrically, the Earth has to be round. You don't have to listen to NASA. You don't have to go up in a plane and pretend that you think that you see that the Earth is flat. I mean, some people go up and see that the Earth is curved because your eye is seeing what it wants to see. But if you physically look at the stars at night and look at how they move, you got to take some time, be patient, stay up all night. You'll see that the only geometric answer for how everything works is that we're on a sphere. However ludicrous or crazy that sounds, there are many things that we don't understand. I understand a little bit about gravity. I understand a little bit about physics. I understand a little bit about navigation and how we use satellites to navigate with. I don't know how high up those satellites are. I just know that we use them to navigate with, and that I would be lost at sea had we not had navigation and the ability to chart a course, have maps of the ocean. And the maps work only if they're curved. The distances only work on a secant, not on a straight line. So some people have argued that, well, why don't they just go over the North Pole to get to Russia? It's closer. Well, you got to take into account air currents, because sometimes the air current will make the plane go faster than if you just go straight against the wind over the North Pole. And then so here's the last thing. Don't let people draw you into an argument by providing other conspiracy theories that you may give credence to. Like, for instance, why can't anyone go to Antarctica? What's down there? Did the ancient kingdom of Tartaria have a nation down there in Antarctica, and then the Nazis came and wiped them out? And there's an inner Earth, or the fact that NASA never took us to the moon. We've never been outside our planet, and satellites are in Earth orbit, but they're in a low Earth orbit because they can't escape the magnetic field. And if you escape the magnetic field, you'll die. I don't know any of that. But what I do know is what I see in the sky at night and what I've seen on the ocean. Don't let someone lead you into a flat Earth philosophy when you could easily see something to prove it to you. Take, for instance, sundials. The video I saw that said the sundial proves that the Earth is flat. They took this flashlight over a map of the planet and they went around in circles and said, see, the Earth is flat. It does the same thing that you see on the sundial. Well, what if you kept the flashlights in the same place and you moved the planet, right? You would get the same thing. And it doesn't explain why the sun shows up in certain locations in certain places, and why in Alaska it stays up for a certain period of time because in certain seasons, or it stays dark for a certain period of time. The only way to explain that is with the geometry of a round planet. So take a sundial, right? You set up a sundial, you do true north, you set up the true north, and then at noon in your time frame on your latitude, you have zero shadow. We call your friend in California, and he's got a shadow at a certain angle. You can figure out the distance to the sun by knowing the distance between you and your friend. Rough idea. Then, to prove it that it's still a sphere, you call your friend in Alaska, and his angle is going to be different at the same time. You call him at the same time, and you can prove the distance back to the sun, and then you recalculate using that proof to prove the other one. You can prove that the only way to explain it is that the Earth is round, given the shadow angles, the whole flashlight spinning around, this Earth sitting in the same place. It's a matter of what is rotating and what is not. Sure, if the sun was rotating like this, we wouldn't have the same situation we have now. But based on seasons and tides and weather and air and temperature changes, the Earth has to be moving and it has to be round. That's all I've got to say. And if that doesn't convince you, I'm sorry. I couldn't make it as plain as I could, but you have the ability to prove it to yourself. You have the ability to X all the crap that they're putting out, all the highfalutin sounding theories, and using your distrust of the government and using your distrust of the cabal and making you believe something that is totally ludicrous. Because you can prove it to yourself if you just go look. That's all I got to say. Thank you for listening.